challenge is working with those people.
With how many farmers do you work, Westrock work?
We work probably directly, I would say 3,000 or 4,000, which is represented.
That's quite a large number.
Yeah, it's a large number. I mean, we obviously want to do more. It's the challenge is getting close to those producers, because just the way logistics work in the country and the way coffee's processed, there's basically two main ways to process coffee. On the ground, it's referred to fully washed and semi-washed. Semi-washed coffee is basically processed in someone's backyard, and dried out on a mat and sold into the local market. And so we are typically buying that semi-washed coffee from an aggregator who had purchased it from the producer. So we're kind of one step, maybe two step removed from the farmer. So we don't like that scenario, because we don't feel like we have a direct impact on the farm. But that's how the vast majority of coffee, that's how coffee has been logistically moved in the country historically. When they started building washing stations in the last 10 to 12 years, you were able to get closer to the farmer because they were delivering their coffee to the wet mill, the washing station as we call it. And so just this year, we actually just last week purchased our first washing station, where we will have direct contact with the farmers. We'll be buying from them directly. So then we can guarantee we know exactly what they were paid. We know exactly the quality they gave us. And then we can have, basically we can audit the process all the way through. And if someone at a retailer level wants to know, where did this coffee come from? How much did he get paid, the farmer producer get paid for this coffee? We can say on the piece of paper, we know that because we were the ones who actually bought it from him, rather than a third party. So.
Tell me about, you guys have decided to do that basically to get into that business to help that country. Give me fact. Describe me exactly how do you guys are lifting people out there out of poverty. Besides the fact that you're providing jobs, in terms of corporate social responsibility, involvement into the community. Tell me about it.
Well, I don't want to sound too lofty, because back to I commented earlier, I think that in the big scheme of things, we can only do so much. We're not going to change the world. And one thing, when I started the bank over there, I learned real quick, microfinance is not the panacea for all. It's not going to by itself. It's not going to pull the whole country out of poverty just because you've got a new microfinance bank on the ground. But same in the way with our coffee business. Our coffee business is not going to change Rwanda by itself. But what we hope by being there is that we, as a foreign investor from the United States, that other companies that might be looking at doing business in Rwanda see us as a pioneer in that area, that we're putting our capital at risk on the ground, and that Rwandans would see us as this is a business that we can trust, that they will pay when they said they will pay, that they will keep their word, that we basically do business in an honorable and ethical way, that can be a beacon for other companies to see, hey, I can actually do business in Rwanda, and I don't have to worry about this perceived corruption or this difficulty in doing business, that the government's going to somehow come in and take my business away. And so what we're trying to be, I guess, in some ways, is a pioneer for other businesses to come in, and then on the ground in Rwanda with the people, what we're wanting to do is we want them to feel like they're getting, because there's competition now. Before we came in, there were two large exporters. We're a third exporter. And by more competition, more people needing the coffee that the producers, the farmers have, that creates a better price on the ground for them to have options. And anytime you have options, as someone who's got a commodity that's worth something, you're ultimately going to be able to glean more value out of it if you've got more than one place to take it. And that's, I think, maybe the biggest impact we've had on the ground.
Tell me about the coffee of Rwanda. How will you describe it? Compare, let's say, to the coffee from Brazil. I know Westrock import coffee from Brazil and other destinations around the world.
Yeah, I'll speak in generalities here, and this is maybe true for a lot of East African coffees versus what maybe Brazilian coffees. East African coffees and Rwanda's, as an example of that, they definitely have maybe a more acidic or brighter flavor than maybe what we're used to drinking in the United States. I know the first time I had Rwandan coffee, I was like, oh, this is interesting because it didn't taste like anything I'd ever had before. And it has a more acidic, citrusy flavor. Brazilian coffee has some really nice body and it's well balanced and it, represents a vast majority, a vast number of most of the coffee that is consumed around the world because they're the biggest producer. But the Rwandan, the Kenyan, the Tanzanian, all those coffees from East Africa, they just have a unique flavor that is going to be, bold is a term used a lot. That you're going to know you're drinking something different than what you've had in the past. Okay. And I say that from the context of a American consumer. In Europe, they're used to drinking African coffees, and if you've ever, as an American, been to Europe and had coffee and go, wow, this is a flavor that I've never had before, it's probably because it came from Africa.
You're talking about flavor. How much does the distinction arabica, robusta matters in terms of blending?
Well, robusta coffee is a a variant of coffee that's grown at lower altitudes. It's hardier. It does not have the same attributes of flavor. It's a little bit more bitter. Has a little bit more caffeine. It's more foam. It's just a cheaper coffee than the arabica, just due to its flavor profiles, where it's in the context of how you would describe it as a consumer, it's the cheaper coffees you might drink, and that's just by the nature of where it's grown and whatnot. At the lower elevations, it just has a different profile. In the regards to blending, a lot of ways, those get down to you're managing to a price point. And at a retailer or a grocery, they want to sell coffee that's in a certain price range because maybe that's all the consumer is willing to pay. Well, in a lot of cases, and we've especially seen this in the last 12 to 18 months, is the coffee prices, the commodity prices have really gone up. There's been a lot of pressure on roasters to start introducing lower quality coffees into their blends to maintain the same margin, or they've had to decide to take a lower margin because the math just didn't work out. And that's, a lot of roasters have been, kind of caught between a rock and a hard place there, because there is a certain price point where consumers just decide, I'll buy cheaper coffee because this is the only price I'm willing to pay. So it's a challenge to try to manage that. Are you going to have your margins squeezed, or are you going to be able to pass it along to the consumer, or are you going to make the decision to maybe find some cheaper coffees? And how you manage all that is the things we deal with every day.
A lot of us, a lot of people drink coffee. I will include myself on those people, without knowing exactly what it takes to produce coffee. I understand from talking to some of them, some roaster, that it's very delicate.
It is.
A lapse of second like that, and then you can ruin a batch.
You can. There are a lot of hands that touch the coffee from the moment it's picked off the tree to the moment it's consumed in a cup in the United States. And a lot of the ultimate quality of that cup can be affected in the first 12 hours that it's picked from the tree. And a lot of that is how the cherry is either, there's several processes. In a lot of cases, they pick the cherry and it dries naturally, and the bean is removed once the cherry is basically dried up. That's a natural process. A lot of coffees are washed, meaning that the bean is removed from the cherry through the wet mill process that I've referred to earlier. And there are so many things in that first few hours that can ultimately affect what the coffee tastes like. It sits in fermentation tanks in some examples, and if you let it sit too long or don't let it sit long enough, it has a bearing. Then, of course, it has to dry, and how long it's dried, and if it rains too much while it's being dried on the drying tables. There's all sorts of different variables that can affect the taste, and it's I always like to take people that do go to Rwanda or any place to go see how coffee is done in the field, because you get to see how delicate a process it really is, and how many people are dedicated to it on the ground to make sure that it maintains its true quality from when it was picked from that tree. Yeah.
I noticed that you guys have almost 12 brand in terms of different type of coffee. And then first question I've come to ask myself, what will you say? Explain or tell me, for example, what do I have if I go to Walmart, for example? Do I need to pick Westrock coffee instead of Starbucks coffee, instead of Folgers coffee?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, obviously this is going to be biased and on my opinion, but
yes,
I would say,
I know
you
that.
know, at the price point that we're selling the coffee that we have in Walmart, those coffees are going to be a better quality coffee than maybe some of the others at that same price point. Obviously, there are better coffees to be consumed in coffee shops and other places, but what we tried to do, given the retailer we were working with in Walmart, and we were asked to do a large set of SKUs from coffees from different origins. We didn't just get to focus on Rwanda, which is really what we're at our core about. We had to go find other origins to kind of fulfill this requirement to have 12 SKUs and have a lot of different origins. We tried to go out and find what's the best coffee we can find to fit in to this price point that Walmart's interested in us being, which I would say is in their context. You know, they were the same price as Starbucks and Dunkin', and those are great coffees, and definitely I like them both. But what we tried to do was create a unique experience for the coffee buyer and who's out there looking for something different. And I think that we fulfilled that. We haven't promoted it as such, but that's what we're offering. We're offering a really unique experience, I think.
You mentioned something, yes, I wanted to touch upon. Unique experience. When I look at your coffee over there, I look at the packaging, the design. I can see all those African features. I would say you guys have a different name, Kivu coffee, Brazilian this, Brazilian that. I have the feeling that basically that you guys are selling what? An exotic experience or what? Is that how you sell coffee?
You know, that was the
what kind of experience you trying to sell there?
That was the concept. We refer to those coffees in Walmart as our adventure series. You know, we try to tie. You know, they have the little animal caricatures on the front that represent an area or a country where that coffee comes from, and we are trying to connect the consumer directly to what they might experience at that country of origin. You know, if you've I'm not a marketer and I'm not real good at trying to describe all this, but in the context of Rwanda, the Rwandan coffee we have has a gorilla on the front and he's sniffing a cup of coffee. Well, if you know anything about Rwanda, that's where the silverback is, and we're trying to kind of create that connection, that the sense of adventure you would have if you were in Rwanda and getting to drink that coffee there on the ground. What's that like? That's the idea.
That's the idea behind. And are you guys gonna go further? When I mean stretch a little bit further, at this moment you guys have the producer, you control the producer, you control the import or export of coffee, you hear roasters, but retailer. Do you guys plan in the future to move there?
I think if we move in any sort of
like own coffee shop, like Java Coffee, Starbucks.
That's if I see us expanding, I actually see us expanding in the opposite direction, back closer to the farmer, because that is that's kind of where as owners and operators of this company, that's where our heart is. I mean, for me, after obviously living there for 2 years and getting to go back and visit, I like to be a part of a company that is not, we're not just doing this to enrich ourselves. We're trying to do something beyond just helping ourselves, and you can do that in any facet of any business, but in the context of what we're doing, to go over there and see farmers that do trust you as a business and do want to do business with you, and know that you're going to get, that they know they're going to get a price that represents the value of all the hard work that they've done. Seeing that to me is kind of where my heart is. And so what I hope we do is when we grow is maybe we're not just in Rwanda, but maybe we're in Burundi. Maybe we go into the Congo someday, go to places that are difficult right now to do business, that very few people are really willing to take that kind of risk to go in and invest capital there hope that they see a return on it or not. We may get into the retail side over here, but the reason we would get into the retail side here would ultimately be to tell the story of what we're doing on the ground.
As an African, I commend you guys for doing that. And I have the feeling that basically you guys have tied the prosperity, I would say the success of Westrock basically to the destiny or to the fate of Rwanda, I would say somehow. Is that a fair assessment from?
Today, that is a very fair assessment, yes.
Now let's talk about the country a little bit. What is it like you've been doing business over there for a certain number of years. Tell me about the challenges that you face over there.
Well, in the context of doing business over there, some of the challenges you face are in regards, to some degree, and this is maybe specific to Rwanda, but there is a capacity level just in regards to the some of the people you have to work with. They've grown so fast and so quick. At their highest levels in government, some of the smartest, sharpest people I've ever met. But then when you have to get down at some of the more junior levels, and you're trying to and especially in our context of the U.S., where we think very entrepreneurially, we're always kind of thinking outside the box and want to get things done real fast. As Americans, and we what's the saying? We've got the watch, and you guys got the time, or something. There's just a different mindset over there, and so you sometimes have the friction of trying to get things done quickly, just with the way things happen over there from a time perspective. It's much more laid back. It's actually not a negative. It's probably a positive. You guys could teach us a thing or two culturally about how to relax and enjoy life rather than just trying to go on to the next thing. So there's some challenges there. We've never had any situations where we've had to worry about corruption or anything like that. It's mostly been dealing with bureaucracy. There's always inefficiencies of bureaucracy, and you have that here in the U.S., but when you have a language difference and a cultural difference, it sometimes gets a little more difficult to work in. But
overall, how will you grade the business environment over there, doing business in Rwanda? Fair?
Yes, I would say it's fair. Sure. Yeah. It's I'd say that when I say fair, it's obviously relative to having some experience doing that. I know if when I first got there, I would have, if you would have said, is this fair? I would have said, no, it's difficult, but I didn't have the context of the culture yet. And now, knowing the culture, we operate fairly efficiently over there, given the context of understanding the way things work.
Have you ever a chance to meet President Kagame? I know he has done a lot, basically, to move his country ahead since basically 1994 event.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to meet him once, and it was when I was living over there, and he's definitely tried to create an environment for people to have opportunities to succeed, and especially in the context of the economy, to be entrepreneurial and to take risk. Still a lot of challenges because obviously to start new businesses, you have to have access to capital, and you not only have to have access to capital, you have to have a marketplace for what you're doing, and that's tough to start from scratch. And I think President Kagame's done a very nice job of creating an infrastructure where that's actually possible, and then it just takes some people willing to take some risk, and hopefully we've been one of those to sort of pioneer the idea that, hey, Rwanda, you can actually invest your money, and there's a court system, a judicial system in place that will protect you as a business entity where you can't be taken advantage of, and we've not felt any of that, and so that's been a nice discovery.
Yes, okay. Yeah. A couple quick questions before we end this interview here. I'd like to ask. I want you to basically your reaction on some type of issue. Have you heard about land grabbing in Africa? Your idea?
Yeah.
How you make of that? Are you guys owning land in Rwanda?
No, I mean we own the land, I guess, or technically that our mill is on. We don't own any land, in the countryside or anything. And Rwanda in particular has a very difficult issue with land because it's the most very small country, most densely populated country in Africa. We don't deal with that too much because we're not in the business of trying to have a plantation or anything. But I see that for the country of Rwanda, that's going to continue to be a difficult issue because you have so many people that are subsistent farmers, outside of the capital city for the most part, and obviously you have a very young average age of a Rwandan, and as the generations continue, that land keeps getting divided and divided where it's not sustainable for a family, and I know they are doing a lot of things to address that, and I hope it can get itself worked out in a way that doesn't take advantage of a group of people or not. And I think they're doing the best they can in that regard. But man, it's difficult just because there's so many people. It really is.
Another quick issue here: American consumer, I would say, even European consumer, are showing an increased interest for the living condition of the people who grow that coffee.
Yeah.
And they tend to buy more and more coffee that are covered by certification like fair trade and so forth. Is that something you buy into?
Right now we don't have any coffees that are certified by third parties. I think all those were obviously set up with the intention of trying to make sure that's occurring on the ground. And it's been a nice thing for a consumer to maybe feel more positive about their purchase of coffee that with a certificate on it that they can feel like that those things are being done. I think there's some negative side effects to those certifications.
Which are?
Well, that it sometimes creates farmers, for example, to potentially, if they're in a certified cooperative, that if they're guaranteed a certain price, why should I try to create a better quality coffee? Because I know I'm going to get the same price anyway because of this certification. I'm not going to prune my trees. I'm just going to pick every cherry I can, and it doesn't really matter what the quality is. And so you sort of skew the marketplace a little bit. Maybe not intentionally, but I've definitely seen instances where that occurs. And for us, because we are so close, at origin, and we're on the ground, we want our story to be about what we're doing specifically. That is maybe audited by a third party and reported on, but we don't want that just to be a label or sticker we put on our bag. We want to include the consumer in the story through our website and through other ways to see what's actually going on, not just sort of feel good about it and not really know. We're looking for those consumers that want to get their hands dirty, if that's a way to describe it.
You guys manage basically to have your product at Walmart, and Walmart move. Walmart now does have a presence in South Africa.
Yes.
When are you guys moving down there?
We've actually had some discussions with them about how we could partner with their expansion into South Africa. They're just kind of getting started in that, and the company that they bought historically has been more of a what I would call in the U.S. a hardware store. It didn't have a lot of food and beverage, and they're just starting to introduce that. And so I would love to be able to be a part of that expansion if that ultimately could help the South African consumer, to give them more choices, and obviously love to get some Rwandan coffee down there. It's not that far away. I'll tell you a funny story. I was in South Africa one time, and I got into a cab, and the cabbie was asking me where I was from. I said, well, I'm living in Rwanda, and he said, well, where's that? And it was funny how the South African had no idea where Rwanda was. Yeah, it was almost like they were living in their own little world down there. So it's kind of interesting, because to me, when I went to South Africa, I felt like I was in the United States, not Africa. And of course, I was in Cape Town, and I know it's a lot different outside of the cities. But it's just interesting where, as an American who had never been there, there's so many different cultures and so many different ways of living in Africa, and we all try to lump it into one thing. And it's that's the interesting and exciting thing about Africa is it's so many different cultures, and you just can't really get a feel for that till you go over and see it yourself.
I'm glad you had a chance to discover that. Yeah. And thank you so much, Todd, for coming on this program.
Thank
I hope
you.
you will come back.
I'd love to. Thanks.
Thank you.